Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Ning.
Sorry, I'm thirsty, so let me get a quick sip. So again, I'm Rex from 6waves, CEO and co-founder. It's okay? All right. Sure. And so I hope you guys all have a good lunch today because I have a lot of information to share with you guys in the next 45 minutes or so. Today, I want to share with you guys actually some global opportunities and also challenges there is for social games and mobile games on various platforms. Some of them you guys probably know very well. Some of them you guys might not know as well. So let's get started. Okay, so before I go into the actual data points and insight, I want to actually give you guys a little bit quick background about 6waves. So 6waves, our main mission is really to connect gamers with developers. So we build publishing platforms. We have actually this service that actually provide various services for our developers, ranging from growth and distribution, to analytics and localization. And we are covering like the world's most dominant app ecosystem, including starting with Facebook. We have pivoted to work on both iOS and Android starting last year. And we're also in some of the more popular Asian network, such as the Penguin, which is QQ, Tencent, and also Yahoo Mobile Game. And our user base is actually really global. We are a very global-oriented company. And if you look at the distribution, it's actually really well balanced across the entire world. We try to achieve like 30, 30, 30 across North America, Europe, and Asia. And we constantly try to add more users to our network via different genre of games and by partnering with some of the local platforms. Currently, our monthly active users stand around 20 million users, and on a daily basis, it's around 3 million DAU. At the same time, since we are a very global company, we do have a lot of global partners, including a lot of developers from this region. We actually work with many developers actually that are in Russia and in Eastern Europe. And we continue to actually explore new territories. There is actually developers popping up from every part of the world. And as a result, we also have office in different parts of the world. We have actually a good team of product managers in this region to really actually help localize the game, to gather local intelligence to help your game excel in different parts of the world. Okay, so that's a quick overview of 6waves. The next, I want to actually go into some data and trends on some of these platforms. We have been actually publishing over 200 games on various platforms. And as a result, we're able to collect a lot of data points. And our PM were able to actually get a lot of local intelligence about each of these platforms. So before I dive into these platforms, I want to give you guys a quick high-level overview by comparing these platforms across various dimensions. So the first one is really looking at the number of users versus number of apps on each of these platforms. The blue bar is basically the number of users on that platforms, and the red bar is the number of active applications. So one quick fact, you can see that Android and iOS has been growing very, very quickly. In fact, they have even actually overtaken both Facebook and Tencent, which are the more mature platform. But Android and iOS has actually more apps on these platforms already. This is actually just a quick snapshot, and you can see this is a good perception on kind of like a supply and demand for each ecosystem. Each of these apps are, each of the developers are actually competing with these number of apps for the kind of like the eyeballs, which is actually the blue bar. One thing to take a quick note here is Tencent. I put like an asterisk next to the 600 million number. One thing to note on Tencent is really not just a platform or just a social network like Facebook. It is really a gaming platform. So Tencent is really a public company, and you can actually see that their revenue, 50% of their revenue is actually derived from games. So Tencent is a gaming platform to begin with, as compared to like a Facebook, only 13 to 15% of their revenue is actually coming from games. Okay, on this next slide, I think is actually something that's fairly interesting to a lot of the independent developers, wondering how like monetization and user acquisition costs would range between the different platforms. In here is actually what we take is some of just a average of some of the games that we publish on these platforms. I split them up between casual and core because casual and core games actually behave very differently between any of these platforms. So let's start with Facebook. Facebook is actually coming in, the average ARPU is around 7 to 8 cents. It has been there for like most of this year. It's not actually rising or declining very quickly. The good thing about Facebook, though, is actually if you look at, especially on the casual side of things, it's the low CPI. We are still paying around 60 cents per installation. And that would actually get even lower in something what we call the effective CPI. Basically, if you take into consideration of the viral installation that you get, you can actually effectively drive down the CPI some more. On the core side of things, it's a little bit different. Even though it monetizes really well, we have games like Kingdom of Camelot, like other like hardcore game that monetize at a very high clip, almost like 50 cents per user per day. But it's hard to actually get a lot of volume behind these style of games on Facebook because like the CPI is expensive and there's not as abundant of audience on Facebook who play these style of games. The next one is Yahoo Mobile Game. We didn't publish any core game on that platform yet. That's why you see kind of like the NA on there. But then for our casual games, because it's Japan, because it's a very high gaming culture country, they monetize really well. So 34 cents even for the same casual game that we bring from Facebook into Japan. So example would be Ravenwood Fair. We have it on both platforms. It's monetizing 3 to 5 times better in Japan than it is on Facebook. The other interesting thing about Yahoo Mobile Game is that they do help promote the game. So a lot of times it doesn't require as much marketing dollars for user acquisitions. In fact, we recently pushed a game on Yahoo Mobile Game. It's actually from Game Insight. It is Mystery Manor. And we're able to actually get Yahoo to actually help feature the game on their front page. So that's something that's actually very impressive, and I will encourage a lot of you guys who is developing for Facebook should actually consider pushing your games onto Japan because it's fairly easy to port, from a technical perspective. There are other cultural barriers that you need to be aware of, which I'll talk about later. The next one is Tencent. You notice like it's much lower in terms of like ARPU, but it's also growing very aggressively. So if the same time last year is probably 1/3 to 1/2 of what they are right now. So within a short year, they were able to grow very quickly, especially on the core game side, which a lot of the Chinese audience, they really like the kind of like the PvP style type games. And that has actually grown very quick. On the cost side of the equation, they just recently opened up, kind of like a similar advertising platform as Facebook. And it's still relatively cheap. Plus, Tencent would also augment, whatever you buy with some of the promotion from Tencent homepage. Finally, is iOS. I didn't put Android in here because for both iOS and Android, they start getting pretty much on par with each other. It has no doubt the highest ARPU among all the platforms. Even on the casual games, it could range between like 8 cents to 10 cents. On a core game, it's just kills it. It basically would register something close to $1 ARPU on a daily basis. But on the flip side of the equation, it's also very expensive and getting even more expensive to advertise on iOS. Discovery continue to be a problem there. For the casual side of things, it's probably range from $1 to $1.50 to acquire user on iOS. And on the core side, it could actually go up to like $4 to $5 easily to get a qualified users. So next one is retention. So again, I split this up into both kind of casual and core. So on the casual side, you notice Yabage and Facebook actually perform better. On the core side, you notice iOS actually does perform better. So one of the key rationale behind that is that it's a very different demographics. It's a very different audience. Facebook gamer tend to skew towards female, higher age group, whereas iOS tend to be kind of like the opposite. It's actually skewed to male and a younger age group. The other thing that why we think actually, at least for the casual side of things, why Facebook and Yabage could retain better is because they are a natural social networks. It's much easier for you as a developer to re-engage these users via like feeds that you actually push out, notification that you push out on the social network itself. Okay, so this next slide is actually very interesting. Basically, what I put together here is the number of independent developers who crack the top 100 grossing in the various platforms. So starting with Facebook, I think this might be surprising to a lot of people. Of the top 100 games, top 100 grossing games on Facebook based on App Center, there are 36% of these games, so 36 games are actually coming from independent developers. So that is actually fairly encouraging because as a developers, even for a platform that's actually pretty mature and well established, for independent developers, you can actually still crack into these, still have a very good chance to crack into the top 100. One of the main reasons I think is because Facebook just have a lot more advertising inventory. And it's not really a chart-based or ranking-based type of discovery mechanism, where if your game is actually performing well, it's fairly easy for you to spend money to kind of like do what I call ROI type marketing behind the game and continue to scale the game so it can crack into the top 100. The next one is Tencent. It's a newer platform, and it's a little bit more dominant by games that are invested by Tencent themselves. So as a result, if you kind of crack that, then you would actually make it into that 5%, or else you remain kind of like one of the independent developers who is trying to get more promotion and investment from Tencent. The next two, iOS and Android, I think a lot of you guys are already quite familiar with. There are a lot of developers who can actually still make it into the top 100 grossing, but it's increasingly getting more difficult because of the discovery problem that are underlying on both Android and iOS. Okay, so this next slide talk about top grossing by genre. The blue bar is actually Facebook, and then red is iOS, green is Android. So again, this is actually a very consistent pattern that we see. Facebook is actually stronger with the casual style games. As you see, puzzles, sims, casino, slots, bingo, these style of games actually perform fairly well on Facebook. And on the flip side, you'll see that if it is a core or strategy style games, it actually performs better on both iOS and Android. Again, it's actually due to the demographics difference between like the two platforms. And one interesting fact is that actually the sport genre only perform well right now on iOS. It's really because it might be skewed to even younger, kind of like a male audience. And a lot of the sports style games actually more arcade based, and it actually performs better on this type of devices. Okay, so that was just a quick tour on like how these platforms like stack up between like some of the different metrics. Next, I would actually go into the platform themselves and give you guys some kind of like plus and minuses that we have learned along the way in publishing games on these platforms. So the first one is Facebook. A lot of people tell me that viral is dead. I would really argue with that because we still publish a lot of games on Facebook, and even like very recent games that we push on Facebook are still growing very dramatically. You see on this graph the orange portion is actually paid marketing. The yellow portion is actually what we do when we do actually cross promotion, and green is actually viral install. In the beginning cycle of a game, a lot of it would actually be dominated by both pay and cross-sell. But once it actually get enough initial momentum or kind of like the initial mass, starting in month 3 to month 6, you actually see a lot more viral install coming into these games. So by the end of like 6 months, you will see that almost like above 60% of install are all coming in through viral, and that's something that I only see happen on Facebook. On the right-hand side, we see still some regional growth. Yeah, of course, there's going to be a lot of a slowdown or even like stagnant for some of the Western countries, but we're still seeing strong regional growth, especially for a lot of the Asian countries. Countries such as Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam, they still actually see very strong growth within the past 3 months. And these are very meaningful countries. They are countries with high gaming culture. They are highly monetizable users. So there are still a lot of room to grow on Facebook, but in specific regions. Next is the low eCPI that I talk about. So we already talked about the CPI would actually come in at around 60 cents for casual games. But because of all the viral install that we're able to get from the game itself, it would actually effectively drive the CPI further down into a range of like 20 to 30 cents, which is very significant. You can have a very high LTV game, but if your eCPI is actually a lot lower, what you can actually profit from it is going to be even more. And there will be some games that if it's not for such a low eCPI, the game would not even be profitable on this platform. The other thing that I think Facebook have done a great job this year is actually App Center. There used to be this thing called the developer dashboard, which I didn't really see a huge impact on our games. But App Center really does actually drive a lot of traffic to a lot of our games, especially on kind of like the top trending and suggested game. Those actually really do drive a lot of traffic into our network of games. And for independent developers out there, this might be something that you guys want to take advantage of, because if you're developing a game that's similar genre or similar style to another game, that game might wind up driving a lot of traffic to you through the suggested game page on Facebook. Okay, then on kind of some of the challenges, so we already quickly talked about some of this. For most of the Western country, growth has really slowed down dramatically on Facebook. And according to Social Baker, which is a metric site for Facebook, the top 12 countries, the top 15 countries, 12 of them has experienced less than 10% growth within the past 3 months. So there are, it is actually slowing down. It's actually being stagnant in terms of the absolute number of users that are on Facebook. And on the right-hand side is actually, they coined the term social gaming fatigue. I think that is real. There are just too many Veil games. There's too many games that actually are sim-style games. But we also see that, while a lot of the Sims games are declining in terms of like both DAU, retention, and monetization, there are new genre of games that are surfacing and that are doing really well on the platform, such as all the casino games out there, such as all the puzzle, bubble, Bejeweled style games. All those are actually growing very quick. If you look at kind of like the top grossing chart on App Center again, you see that the Sims games used to dominate, like the top 100. Right now, it's actually probably down to less than 30%. But then both puzzle and casino style games really ramp up in terms of like the number of titles that hit the top 100 grossing. Okay, so next one is iOS. So it's no secret that iOS has actually the highest ARPU of all. For a game, like a hardcore game, a car battle game like Rage of the Behemoth, it can actually go beyond, like $1.25 per user per day. And that's something that Apple has worked very hard on. They have built up credit card relationship like no one else. They have been doing this since like the days of iTunes. Seamless payment, it's just very easy to pay for stuff on Apple. And also the people who afford to actually buy iPhone and iPad are a little bit more affluent. They have actually higher spending powers. And when they see content that's relevant and that they are passionate about, they're really willing to actually pay for it. The other side is kind of iOS 6. Really what I'm talking about is just Apple continued commitment to improve the app stores, discovery, the entire ecosystem. So you see on iOS 6, there's actually much better Facebook integration, which make it easier for you to recommend your friends to new games. There's the IDFE, so it's make it much easier for you to actually track, like how users actually go across different network, how your campaigns are doing from different providers. And finally, just baking in categories as part of like chart and Genius. Make it easier for a specific category to actually get services, especially for a specific category of games. Then on the downside, it's basically all about discovery. If you look at kind of like a data point that Disimo posted back in May, it took around 40,000 install to get you onto the top 25 category. That is actually back in May. So as of today, we're already seeing that in order for you to make a top 25 overall, you need at least 100,000 install. And those install could be fairly expensive. They could be like between $2 to $3. So you can calculate how much it takes for you to do one burst campaign onto the top 25. On the right-hand side is continued rising of the CPI. The Fixu actually do have an index that actually track, how competitive it is and how much you need to pay for a loyal user. And it actually dipped quite a bit when, before the release of iPhone 5. But we do expect, it's going to get even higher as we approach the holiday season. Last year, I still remember very clearly, last year was fairly competitive already for if you want to actual game to rank high during December. But last year, DNA and Gree was not even in the picture. And this year, Gree is actually offering like $3.50 for every install that you can actually drive into their game. So this year is going to be even more fun and even more competitive for the space. So next one is Android. Android is actually like breaking news on almost a daily basis. The number of devices, the number of users on the platform. The latest one is actually 500 million. That's the number of devices that they have activated today. And they're doing another 1.3 million on a daily basis. So the market size of that is just incredible. I'm pretty sure like by the same time next year, it's going to break all the records. It's going to be way ahead of even iOS in terms of like number of users and devices. And it's not just the number of users, but the ARPU, the monetization, is actually doing very well too. Again, according to our data and also validated by like TinyCo, the ARPU for a lot of the Android games actually catching up very quickly to what an iOS game is. So it's actually the same style of games. It actually attracts like the same type of audience. So it's going to catch up very quickly in terms of like the monetization side of the equation. Okay, on the downside, you have a lot of users, you have a lot of devices, but then it also has a lot of apps that's competing for the same eyeballs. There's 600,000 apps today on Android, and a lot of these apps were actually built this year. So this number is going to go up even more as we approach Christmas season and at the same time next year. Again, on the right-hand side, rising CPI. It used to be relatively cheaper to acquire a user on Android, but that's not that long ago. So in our report by W3I, you can see that the marketing cost for Android has actually jumped 80% since January. So it's also approaching almost on par to acquire an Android user than it is on iOS. again, having like the same discovery type issues. So one last note on both iOS and Android. I feel right now one of the main issues is that there's really not a unified ad platforms that offer enough inventory for like all the kind of independent developers out there. As most of you know, majority of the developers work with over 10 suppliers, or sometimes 20 suppliers. They all have very different kind of like reporting mechanism. They all have a very sporadic, like inventory. And to add to that, if you look at the right-hand side of the equation, you have to work with another list of these provider offshores. So let's say if I were to bring the same game into Japan, the right-hand side you see kind of like the equivalent of Tapjoy, the equivalent of Flurry, the equivalent of Free App of the Day. They have like this type of service like in Japan, but it's a completely different providers. So it is a very tall task to do user acquisition. And it's a lot of actually time has to be spent on not just running the campaign, managing the campaign, but managing the relationship with all these providers. I do feel that things might get better. I do feel that Facebook might be a very competent platform for advertising for even mobile. And they have the most sophisticated targeting mechanism where I can specifically target a iPhone 4. I can specifically target an iPad. And I also know what previous game these users have played. I know their demographics. So I do feel that Facebook would actually help change like some of this inability to actually to market on these platforms. And we have been conducting some initial tests with Facebook on their ads, and it come back very positive. Okay, next I'm going to talk about some of the platforms that you guys might not know so well. This one called Yabage. It's a joint venture between Yahoo and MobileGate in Japan. So one quick thing is, there has been, when we talk about games, we really kind of like think of like mobile games, we think of Angry Birds. Social games, we would think of like Farmville or something. But actually, Japan has actually helped invented a lot of like the global hits, dating back to like Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. And they are just a really gaming-oriented country. And it makes a lot of sense for you guys actually to port your games onto their platforms. They play games all day, even when they are kind of like commuting in the subway, at home, at work. So they consume content like no other users that I've seen on other platforms. Monetization is also, as a result, the monetization is also very, very high. They consume items and level so quickly that sometimes we are not prepared. When we initially actually port Ravenwood onto the Yabage network, they just ran out of actual consumable items. So we have to go back and add in more decorative and consumable items for that specific audience in order for the game to be viable. On the on the flip side, the challenges for Japan is actually really localization. And by localization, I don't mean Google Translate. I don't mean, because like a lot of games actually translate fairly well from English into a lot of the European-speaking languages. It's basically a language translate. But for a game to go from Facebook to Yabage, there's a lot of tweak that we need to make. The look and feel would be very different. Japan like very cutesy stuff, a lot of 2D characters. So we need to adopt a lot of that in order for the game to be viable on the platforms. I already talked about, Japan user also consume stuff very quickly. So we built in a lot more initial level and consumable items before the game is launched. And on the right-hand side is actually another issue with this platform is developer support. Even though it's actually open API, there is documentation for the platform, but it's not so well translated. They don't get updated as frequently. So as a result, you really need a good kind of like a local partner to work with in order for your game to really excel on this platform. So the last platform that I'm going to cover is actually Tencent. Huge market, as you guys would know. 500 million served already, and we're just talking about just Tencent alone in China. There's probably 5 other gaming networks in China that you guys should be aware of. But Tencent alone has so many active gamers, as I talked about earlier. If you look at the right-hand side of the slide, 50% of their revenue is actually derived from gaming. So these gamers are very active on this platform. And if you, being one of the top 10 game on Tencent right now can already generate 3 million USD per month, that's pretty substantial. That's like $100,000 a day. So again, if you are already creating a game on Facebook, Tencent is also a very viable platform. You just need to solve some of the kind of like idiosyncrasy in China, but you would actually generate a very good incremental revenue on this platform. So some of the challenges for Tencent, again, has to do with localization. And for China, the localization is not really about just the content of the game, but how the game is operate and how the game is run. So what we do is we have actually special general manager in our China team to actually help operate these Chinese game. They have strange behavior. They like to have special weekly event and tournament. They like this VIP system. I don't know, like maybe Chinese like to be VIP or something, but everyone would actually buy this subscription VIP, where then they get discount on every in-game purchase that they purchase going on out. But that is a behavior that is very popular in China. And on the right-hand side on the equation is actually regulatory stuff. There's a lot of them in China. You need several licenses just to operate a social or any online games in China. And if it's much better if you actually work with a local partner to do that, because like if you don't understand how China operates, it's very hard for you to get this type of license and operate in that environment. And then there's a whole bunch of regulations and rules that I'm not going to read through, but just to give you an example, online games, they try to restrict the time that if you're 18 and under, you cannot spend too much time on the game. They will kick you out of the game. So there's a lot of stuff that developers need to be aware of on how to actually optimize a game to avoid some of this pitfall and to maximize monetization on these platforms. So that's basically all the top 5 platforms that I go through today. And before I go into questions, there are just some takeaways that I want to kind of share with you guys. From an independent developer's perspective, before you formulate a platform strategy, the first thing you need to know is really your core competency. We see too many developers who are really good casual game developers. They try to create a core games on a different platform, and it doesn't work for them, or they would never actually get on the first few try. The other thing is actually know your odds. Every developers I met think they have the best game. And a lot of times they do have a very high quality game, but not every one of these games is going to be a top 10 game on all the platforms. So you need to decide whether you have a slim chance of being a top 10 game on one platform versus you have a good chance of being a top 50 game on other platforms. And that has a lot to have to do with your core competency and how you can actually excel on these platforms. Finally, you need to know your discovery strategy. A lot of the developers just would tell me that their discovery strategy is just, I'm just going to build a kick-ass game that's good enough where everyone's going to go play. Yes, that might be true for some games, and there's a lot of games that get a lot of love, that get features, but what if it didn't? There are still a lot of games. Tell me one game set you think is very good. I can tell you 10 more games that is even better that has never been featured or get the same type of love that they have from the different platform. So you need to know how you can actually grow your games by how much you need to be spending on which platforms. And actually, at the end of the day, prioritize your time accordingly. It's very difficult to be very good on all platforms. There's only so many Angry Birds out there. So you need to actually think about what you can actually do best. And the thing I would say is you should focus on the opportunities that's actually most relevant. Stuff change all the time. Ecosystem change all the time. Even user acquisition strategy change all the time. So you need to know at that snapshot in time what is actually best for you and how you can actually leverage those opportunities. So that's basically my presentation for today, and I'm going to open up for question on the floor. Yes.
Very nice presentation, I must say. Very professional.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a question regarding iOS 6
Right.
and top 25.
Right.
If you can relate to this a little bit, and I think that this game of top 25, top 50 has been changed recently with this iOS 6 display.
Right.
And how this come into marketing applications and top positions on the iOS on mobile, not on iTunes. And you also mentioned numbers, 40,000. I wondered, like, on which markets did you refer to with the iOS and top position?
Right, the 40,000 is actually for the English speaking, for the US market. Okay. Right. So I think that's probably the market that most developers want to actually go after. But again, like I was talking about, focus on relevant opportunity. There's a lot of games out there. They don't even have to be like top 25 on US, but still be able to actually generate a lot of money because like they are in other smaller country like Northern Europe actually does actually generate a lot of monetization, and you don't have, and it's actually most competitive for you to actually try to go after US. So from us, we also try not to go into US first, and we want to see how the game actually perform on some of these other countries, and then actually go back to US if it's really compelling. And that's how we kind of like do this process in 6 ways. Right. What about iOS 6? Oh, yeah, so basically top 25, right now they changed the App Store so that it's actually side scrolling. So I think it's good and bad, right? So before, why everyone want to get on the top 25? Because like you get on that first page, right? So on iOS 6 now it's actually side scrolling. So there's actually people who actually go a little bit more or it will go a bit less. But the thing is, you're still trying to get to a top position. That's not changing, right? So you still don't want to actually scroll like 2 minutes to the right to actually find your application from a discovery perspective. So, and that's why, it's still relevant in terms of like how much you need to spend to actually get to the best placement and best position, even for iOS 6. And there is kind of like the overall chart, which you actually go back into, then it go vertical again, kind of like the old style if you go into like a particular categories. So from a category perspective, it still matter a lot in terms of like what position you're in.
Other questions for Rex? I would love to hear how your business has changed over the course of the last year. Mm-hmm. In terms of what kinds of games you look for and where you look for them. Right.
So, yeah. So I think one of the things that I already talk about is I think a lot of these information is actually very transparent, especially now with Facebook opening up like App Center. You can really see that what genre is doing good in a particular time, right? So before, I would say a year ago, there's a lot of actually sim-style games, both on mobile and on social, that we really focus on because that's where the money is. But this year, we actually start seeing a lot of the puzzle-style games, like bubble games, like Bejeweled-style games. Those are very, very compelling from our perspective. Even though the monetization might be a little bit lower, but they are a lot more viral. So it actually drives down my eCPI. The way that I look at it is always arbitraging between your LTV and eCPI. I don't need to have the highest LTV if I can have very, very low eCPI. So I think that's one area that we've been pushing a lot on is to further grow this game that has actually high DAU, lower ARPU, but actually very, very low user acquisition cost. That's on the social side. On the mobile side, because of the discovery problem that we all talk about, it's difficult to have a very successful casual game. It's just very difficult. If you look at kind of like the top grossing chart on App Annie or anywhere, there are always like a car battle games or hardcore games. It's like a Kingdom of Camelot style games. They really change on the top 10. So as a result, on the mobile side, we become a lot more selective in choosing and picking games that has to be a little bit more core or hardcore style play games. That might not be the case earlier this year with Android because Google, I think, is a little bit more fair in terms of servicing different style of games to the top of their chart. But I think with all these players coming in and a lot more applications competing on Android again, that would also happen to that particular ecosystem.
Any other questions for Rex? No? Oh, wait.
Hi.
Yes.
Good to find you, because I think we are only Asians,
right.
in this venue, so very minority. So I'm here to just find some game developers from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And for you, how did you find your interest in the Chinese market or Asian market of this kind of like a European people?
Right. The interest in Asian market, right? I think it's very interesting for people who has been developing casual games or social games because it represents like an incremental revenue to their games. A lot of these games, a lot of these platforms that are both in Japan and China, like Tencent, they try to replicate the Facebook API. And because of that, it makes it very easy for a Facebook game to be ported into these platforms. And there are a lot of companies out there in Asia, and ourselves included, that actually offer this type of service to actually help port your game onto these platforms. And so for a lot of the developers, it should be a no-brainer. You should just actually try to build a game that is as universal as possible, and then kind of leave it up to a local partner to actually help you port these games into Asia. Like I said, Japan is very compelling already because of the 3 to 5 times higher monetization. It has less people, but they just monetize much faster and much quicker. China is right now is not as doesn't monetize as well yet, but it also has a very high potential. So this is actually the opportune time to actually get into China, where the CPI is still low, where there's actually still lower number of games competing, with other games. So, but by this time next year, I'm pretty sure the ARPU is going to double again, or if not triple, especially for the core style games in China. So I do feel that those are very, very compelling market that Western developers should be aware of.
So a quick poll in the audience. How many people in the audience have a game today that you would like to see in Asia this year? There you go. There's your answer. Take down names.
Sure.
Hi. I have a very, very brief question.
Sure.
Because you have been talking about multiple platforms and cross-platforms, actually, mobile, web, whatever. We know from the history that it's been very difficult to port games across mentalities and territories. So what is your feeling about this? Because not every game works within Europe, within Asia, etc. What is your feeling about it?
So, well, I think that's 2 separate questions, right? So there are difficulty between different platforms, and then there's difficulty between different regions and countries, right? So platforms, like I said, if your Facebook is actually fairly closely corresponded to the Tencent and Yabage and any other, social platform that try to emulate Facebook, right? The difficulty often is actually between mobile and web. So we are actually seeing more developers using technology like Unity, which is good and bad. So it's good for mobile because you download Unity as part of a package. But then on Facebook, if you use Unity, then you obviously get a lot of, you have a lower conversion rate because a lot of people on Facebook would not try to install Unity just to play your game, right? So like I said, that's why you need to actually focus on stuff that you think is actually relevant. It's very hard for you to be, across like all the different platforms, like from day one. You need to prioritize and start with the one that you think is actually the most compelling. I mean, for the most compelling platform, if you cannot succeed on that, right, then you don't need to actually think too much about some of these other platforms yet. Try to prove yourself on that platform first. And same with country. I think country, you can actually get a lot more help from different publishers or local partners, but choose where you actually have the most competency. If you're English speaking, do the English game first, right? And then let other people help you localize and adapt the game into Asia.
We have time for one more question. No more questions? All right, well, speaking of local platforms, we have Odin Klasnicki on stage next. So thank you very much, Rex.